You ever get that gut feeling like the universe is trying to whisper something before it punches you in the face? That's how it started for me. A gut feeling. I wasn't supposed to be home that day. Molly had left the day before for a 3-day corporate team-building retreat in Denver. She'd packed her little gray carry-on, kissed me goodbye at 6 a.m. and waved like everything was normal. We were supposed to be in a good place. At least, that's what I told myself. So when a last-minute change at work gave me the option to head back early, I jumped at it without thinking. I told myself it was spontaneity. A surprise visit. But looking back now, I think something in me already knew. The drive through the mountains was peaceful like the calm before a storm. I stopped for gas at this little station I hadn't been to in years, and I remember thinking how strange it felt to be alone in that moment. Molly and I used to take road trips together. We'd argue over playlists, laugh about billboards, share gummy worms. But lately, I don't know. Something had shifted. Her laugh didn't come as easily. Her eyes always seemed a little too distant. Still, I didn't expect what I saw when I pulled off the main road and started heading toward home. About 20 minutes outside the city, there's a detour that runs alongside a wooded area near the foothills. Tucked there, nestled like some picture-perfect secret, is a little strip of rental cabins. You'd miss them if you weren't paying attention unless you were looking for them. That's when I saw her car. Molly's silver Subaru, parked in front of one of those cabins like it belonged there. Her Keep Tahoe blue bumper sticker still half-peeled on the left side and the scratch near the rear view from that time she clipped a mailbox? Yeah, that was her car. No doubt. I slowed down. My first thought wasn't even suspicion. It was confusion. Maybe the company retreat was at the cabins this year? Maybe they changed plans last minute and she hadn't thought to mention it? But no, that didn't make sense. These cabins were cozy, romantic, the kind of place couples go to escape, not where regional sales managers go to build team synergy. I parked my truck around the bend and walked up on foot. Quiet. Careful. Something was pounding in my chest, not just adrenaline, but something colder. Like dread was trying to claw its way out of me. The closer I got to the cabin, the more surreal it felt. I could hear laughter. Faint, but warm. Familiar. Hers. Through the glass patio door, I saw her. Molly. My wife. Barefoot on a plaid blanket tossed across a leather couch, her legs folded up underneath her like she was perfectly at ease. She wore one of those oversized sweaters she always said made her feel cozy but *XY. And she was smiling. Not just smiling, glowing. Soft and natural in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Next to her sat a man. Not just sitting. Leaning in. Close. She had one hand resting gently on his thigh. His head was tilted toward her like they were sharing something private, something meant for 2 people, not 3. I didn't knock. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the door and walked inside. The moment I stepped in, the air shifted. Molly froze, her smile vanishing mid-laugh. The man beside her straightened immediately, eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. But Molly, she recovered quickly. Eli, she said, blinking as if surprised to see me, as if I'd materialized out of nowhere. What are you doing here? Her voice was steady, almost scolding, like I was the one who owed her an explanation. I looked at her. Then at him. He was in his late 30s, clean-cut, designer hoodie, wedding ring conspicuously missing. His body tensed, but he didn't say a word. Molly stood up, brushing her hands against her sweater as if smoothing invisible wrinkles. Her tone shifted from shock to sugar-coated in seconds. This isn't what it looks like, she said. I didn't answer. We were just talking, she continued, stepping between me and the couch like she could physically block what I'd seen. This is Travis. He's on the strategy team. He was just giving me advice about a project. It's not what you think. I looked down at the glass of red wine still sweating on the side table. 2 glasses. One nearly empty. The other with lipstick on the rim. Really? I said, keeping my voice calm, which surprised even me. Just talking. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I know how it looks, but it's not like that. I didn't expect you. You should have called. It was a strange thing to say. You should have called. Like I had intruded on something private. Like I was the one breaking the rules. Travis muttered something about stepping outside and practically bolted through the back door. Coward. Molly stood there, arms crossed now, like she was preparing for an argument I wasn't interested in having. I just kept staring at that couch, at the space where her hand had rested, the curve of her body leaned toward his. I don't know what you're thinking, she said, voice softer now. But I need you to believe me. I didn't respond. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just turned and walked back out. The wind hit me harder than I expected. Sharp. Real. It carried that scent of pine and cold mountain air, everything the cabin used to mean. Escape. Peace. Love. And now? A crime scene with no bodies, just evidence and absence. Back at the truck, I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. The keys dangled from the ignition, unmoving. I stared at the dashboard but couldn't bring myself to turn the engine on. My hands rested on the steering wheel, motionless. Inside me, something cracked. Quiet, but deep. A hairline fracture in everything I thought I understood about us. I'd always trusted Molly. Even when the spark dimmed. Even when she got distant. Even when she started turning her phone screen away from me or brushing off late nights as quarter-end chaos. I told myself this was just marriage, ups and downs, normal ebb and flow. But this wasn't ebb. This was erosion. That night, I didn't ask her any more questions. I didn't demand answers. We barely spoke. She texted me from the bathroom saying she was sorry I misread things. That she hoped we could talk about it when I was less reactive. Reactive. Like I'd been unreasonable. Like the sight of her hand on another man's thigh was a scene I'd invented. I went to bed on the couch and stared at the ceiling for hours. Sleep never came. Instead, my mind played that image on a loop, the relaxed angle of her body, the way she touched him like it was second nature. Like she'd done it before. The next morning, she acted normal. Overly normal. She made coffee, whistled while scrambling eggs, kissed my temple, and said she hoped I'd let it go. Let it go? But I didn't argue. Not yet. Because in that moment, something inside me had shifted. Quietly. Permanently. Like a door that clicks shut behind you. I didn't tell her that I no longer believed her. I didn't tell her that I'd never see her the same again. I just smiled. Nodded. And started paying attention. After that day at the cabin, things changed, but not in the way I expected. Molly didn't apologize. Not really. She just leaned into this strange version of herself, overly cheerful, overly present, like she was auditioning for the role of the perfect wife in a play we both knew had already lost its audience. She started cooking again. Not just meals, my meals. The ones I loved back when we first started dating. Creamy mushroom risotto, butternut squash soup with grilled cheese on sourdough, lemon pepper chicken with garlic roasted potatoes. She even downloaded a recipe for that lavender tea cake I used to rave about from our trip to Carmel, something she hadn't made in 5 years. Suddenly, it was like she was trying to rewind time. Like if she could hit enough of the right nostalgic notes, I'd forget the symphony of suspicion playing underneath. She started making playlists too. Ones she claimed she just stumbled across. But they were the exact songs we'd listened to on our honeymoon in Big Sur. Sweet Thing by Van Morrison. Holocene by Bon Iver. Just like Heaven, but the acoustic version. I remember her swaying in the kitchen while they played, trying to catch my eyes, smiling like it was all innocent. And for a while, I played along. I didn't say much. I went through the motions, smiled when appropriate, nodded when she talked. But inside, I was unraveling thread by thread. She never brought up the cabin again. Not once. It was as if she'd erased it from her memory and expected me to do the same. And maybe that was the worst part, her confidence. The way she acted like my silence meant forgiveness instead of calculation. Her phone was always on silent now. I'd notice her glancing at it when she thought I wasn't looking, subtly sliding it face down whenever she set it down. And it wasn't just that, it was out of sight more often than not. Left upstairs when she came down for breakfast. Left in her purse while we watched TV. Once, I walked into the bedroom and found her on the edge of the bed, whispering urgently into the phone with the bathroom door cracked open. She jumped when she saw me. Work stuff, she said, as if I'd asked. Must be serious, I replied. She shrugged. It's budget season. You know how that goes. But she wasn't in finance. She hadn't worked with budgeting since 2019. Still, I didn't push. Instead, I started noticing the patterns. How she started wearing perfume again, Chloe, the one she used to wear when we were first dating. How she swapped out her usual cotton pajamas for matching silk sets even when we weren't being an asterisk mate. How her trips to the gym doubled, but she never seemed to break a sweat when she got home. One morning, I walked into the laundry room and saw her unloading a bag with a new set of lingerie tags, still attached, delicate stuff, expensive, the kind of thing people don't wear alone. I asked her what it was for, and she laughed nervously. Just felt like updating my wardrobe, she said. Been a while, right? She held up a pale pink bra I'd never seen before, then quickly stuffed it back into the bag. That same week, she had another conference. This time in San Diego. She booked the flight, made sure I saw the itinerary, even left the work packet sitting out on the kitchen island like a prop. I didn't say anything, but I watched closely. She packed her bags with the precision of someone going somewhere important. Jewelry boxes that hadn't been opened in years. Her best perfume. 2 pairs of heels. A silk robe I'd forgotten she even owned. No sweatpants. No laptop. Just the essentials if you were meeting someone you wanted to impress. I offered to drive her to the airport. She declined. "It's out of your way," she said. "I'll just grab a rideshare." I watched from the window as the Uber pulled up and she smiled down at her phone before getting in. She didn't look back once. After she left, I walked into the closet. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe I thought I'd find a note. Maybe I just wanted to feel something solid in my hands. Instead, I found that same empty drawer she used to store her old journals, the ones she said were too embarrassing to read. Now it was neatly arranged with travel toiletry bags, 4 of them. All perfectly labeled. She wasn't improvising. She was rehearsed. It wasn't just the travel either. Her late meetings became routine. Always just long enough to miss dinner. Always just enough time to make sure I'd be asleep when she got home. When I stayed up, she acted surprised. "You didn't have to wait for me," she'd say, setting her keys down gently. "I told you I'd be late." "Yeah," I'd reply. "You did." She'd kiss my forehead and ask how my day was, but her eyes would already be drifting toward the hallway, toward the shower, toward the part of the house where I couldn't follow. One night, I stayed in the car after she'd gone inside from running errands. I just sat there, staring at the empty driveway, wondering what the hell had happened to us. When did we stop telling each other the truth? When did it start to feel like I was sharing a bed with a stranger who knew all my secrets but none of my heart? I didn't want to be that guy. The one who goes snooping through drawers and digging through bags. But I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore, that hollow space between us that kept widening no matter how tightly I tried to hold on. So I started writing everything down. Times. Dates. Excuses. What she wore. What she said. Where she said she was going. Where she actually went when I could verify it. I even checked her location history on Google Maps once, under the guise of needing to confirm where we ate last month. Most of it looked normal. But there was one pin that caught my eye, as some little restaurant 2 counties over with a wine bar next door. I clicked the timestamp. 8:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. She claimed she was crashing at the hotel near her office to prep for a big presentation. I remember thinking maybe there's an innocent explanation. But even then I didn't believe myself. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I dug out my old gear. Back when I was doing freelance security work, I kept a small kit in the garage, legal-grade tracking tools, voice recorders, a couple discrete cameras. I hadn't touched them in years, but I knew how to use them better than anyone. If she was lying to me and every cell in my body told me she was, I needed more than a hunch. The next time she said she had a business dinner, I kissed her goodbye and wished her luck. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. Placed a GPS tracker under her bumper. Hid a slimline recorder behind the panel in the trunk. Nothing that would raise red flags. Just enough to hear what needed hearing, to see what needed seeing. I felt sick afterward. Not because I doubted what I was doing, but because I didn't. When she came home that night, everything was the same. She peeled off her earrings, climbed into bed, and kissed my cheek. "You still awake?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just pretended to be asleep while she scrolled through her phone in the dark. That was the moment I knew I didn't trust her anymore. Not with the truth. Not with my heart. Not with anything. And as much as it hurt to admit, some part of me didn't even recognize the woman lying next to me anymore. She was familiar. But she wasn't mine. I didn't want it to be real. That's the part people don't understand. When you suspect your partner is cheating, the movies make it look like revenge kicks in right away, rage, storming out, throwing plates. But that's not how it felt. Not for me. I didn't want confirmation. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed every piece of evidence I found would point back to me just being paranoid, overly cautious, too messed up from my own past. I would have given anything to find nothing. But the truth has a way of showing up when you're finally ready to see it. 2 days after I installed the GPS tracker and recorder in Molly's car, she told me she'd be heading to Santa Cruz for another work conference. She left early, barely kissed me goodbye. Her suitcase was lighter than usual and her voice was too chipper, like she was overcompensating. I waited exactly an hour after she pulled out of the driveway, then logged into the tracking interface on my laptop. The car wasn't headed toward any known conference center. Not the Marriott. Not the usual hotel her team used downtown. It was going south along the coast, hugging the shoreline, past every known business destination. Eventually, the dot settled at a boutique waterfront hotel with a reputation for luxury stays and private guest services. It was the kind of place you book when you're not trying to be found. The reservation wasn't under her name either, it was under Travis Maddox. The same man from the cabin. I sat there staring at the name on the digital check-in record, my chest tight. Travis. It wasn't even subtle. I downloaded the audio file that had been uploading from the recorder in her car. At first, it was just the ambient shuffle, music on low, GPS voice commands, Molly humming. Then about 30 minutes in, a second voice joined hers. Male, confident, familiar in that casual, smirking way I remembered from the cabin. I turned the volume up. They joked about traffic, about wine pairings, about which room number he'd booked. Then, around the 45-minute mark, she said something that changed everything. So we're still thinking spring for the split? That way I get the house before the market shifts and Eli doesn't lose his mind during tax season? And then his voice. Exactly. I told you timing is everything. The longer you play it sweet, the better the optics. You're the one who looks blindsided, not him. There was laughter after that. Not awkward, nervous laughter. Real, in asterisk mate, familiar. Like they'd practiced this before. Like it was a game they knew the rules to and I didn't. I paused the recording. My hands were shaking. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning the divorce. Strategizing how to make it look like I was the unstable one. Like I was the reason she needed to leave. Like it was all just circumstance and heartbreak instead of calculated betrayal. I opened up her laptop, something I had avoided doing for months. Her password hadn't changed. Same as always, our anniversary. I hated how that made me feel. Inside her email were the breadcrumbs of a whole second life. Confirmation emails from restaurants I'd never been to. Venmo receipts for wine tastings, couples massages, even 2 tickets to a jazz concert in Napa on a night she told me she was working late prepping a regional forecast deck. The subject line of the email? Hope he doesn't catch on. But the most damning thing wasn't digital. It was printed and hidden in plain sight. I found it 2 days later when she was out meeting with a client. Tucked behind a stack of unused printer paper in the office drawer was a manila folder labeled Private Do Not Touch. Inside were spreadsheets. Real estate appraisals. Lists of assets in my name. Notes scribbled in the margins like a battle plan. Could argue emotional neglect. Ask Heather for sample language. Prenup expired. Possible leverage? Look into spousal support. California standard equals 40% of higher earner. There was even a valuation of my late uncle's ranch in Nevada. The same property she once called a dusty patch of nothing with too many bugs. Now it was circled in red ink with a post-it, potential vacation rental investment post-divorce. She'd already moved past the betrayal. She was in the business planning phase of the separation. She wasn't wondering if it would happen. She was organizing how to profit from it. That was the moment the heartbreak stopped feeling soft. It calcified. That night, I sat on the porch with a legal pad in my lap and started writing a list of everything I knew. Times, places, recordings, screen captures. I wasn't just a man being cheated on. I was a man being handled. Groomed for a strategic exit. Framed for a clean break. I couldn't sleep. So I went for a drive. Ended up parked outside the same waterfront hotel. I watched the entrance from across the street, headlights off. Around 10:17 p.m. I saw her. Molly. Walking out with Travis, hand in hand, laughing at something he said. She leaned into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't even look over her shoulder. That was when the final piece clicked into place. I'd spent weeks giving her the benefit of the doubt, wondering if I was just seeing ghosts in the shadows. But ghosts don't leave receipts. They don't hold hands in public. They don't schedule your financial destruction in bullet points. They were real. And now I had proof. I copied every file to a secure drive, made 2 backups, and contacted an old friend from my security workdays, a guy named Marcus who now ran a private investigations firm. I gave him everything. Told him I needed eyes on Travis. I wanted to know who he was, where he came from, and if this was his first time sinking his claws into someone else's life, or just the latest. Marcus called me back within 48 hours. Eli, he said, you're not going to like this. Travis had a history. Not criminal, nothing that would pop on a casual search, but a pattern. He had been named, albeit quietly, in 3 different divorces over the past 7 years. None went public. All were settled fast. Each woman walked away with a sizable chunk of assets from their ex. And in 2 of those cases, the women were represented by the same attorney Molly had just retained for family estate planning. It was a setup. A coordinated, calculated scheme. Travis wasn't just some guy. He was the bait. The instigator. The blueprint. And Molly was the latest to buy in. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because the worst part of all this wasn't the cheating. It was the certainty. The practiced confidence. The way they'd already moved on while I was still trying to believe in the version of her that hadn't existed for months, maybe years. So I did the one thing she hadn't expected. I stopped reacting. I smiled when she smiled. I nodded when she spoke. I let her believe the play was working. But inside I was already mapping my next move. Because the difference between heartbreak and strategy is timing. And my time was coming. Once I knew what I was looking at, everything around me started making sense. It wasn't just an affair. It was a scheme. Molly's betrayal had structure. Layers. Timing. Like it had been pitched in a boardroom before it ever landed in our living room. I kept playing back the conversations we'd had over the past year, things she said that seemed forgettable at the time but now rang out like warnings I hadn't heard. Have you ever thought about what you'd do if we downsized? Do you think it's fair that inheritances don't count as shared property? Would you ever consider putting the ranch in a trust, just in case? At the time, I chalked it up to late-night curiosity. One of those hypothetical spirals couples go down after a glass of wine and too many documentaries. But now I realized what it was. Reconnaissance. She'd been gathering information. Probing me. Testing what I would share. What I'd protect. What I didn't even think to secure. And I'd played right into it. After Marcus confirmed Travis's background and Molly's attorney's disturbing proximity to multiple suspicious divorce settlements, I decided I needed more than just evidence. I needed insurance. The kind that doesn't live on a flash drive. I wanted people involved. Real names. Real consequences. So I hired someone else. A second investigator, this time someone with a specialty in family law fraud and attorney misconduct. Her name was Claire, a sharp, former prosecutor turned investigator out of Sacramento. She wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I gave her the green light and full access to every document I'd gathered. Within a week, she came back with a folder thicker than I expected. Molly's attorney, let's call him Jeff Kessler, had been named in 3 confidential bar complaints tied to aggressive asset extraction in divorce cases, all involving a sudden appearance of the same third party in each relationship. That third party? Travis. Different cities. Different women. Same playbook. And each time, Jeff was the representation of choice. Claire even found evidence suggesting Travis and Jeff had attended college together. Same fraternity. Same undergrad. Same network. They were running a play, one they'd tested and refined. Claire laid it out for me in plain terms. They scout financially stable men, preferably ones who recently came into an inheritance or family assets. Then they insert Travis. He becomes the emotional crutch, the spark. The woman gets emotionally extracted from the marriage before she even leaves the house. Meanwhile, Jeff begins preparing the legal framework, early, quietly, so that by the time the husband knows what's happening, he's already boxed in. They've done this before? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She nodded. 3 cases I could confirm. There are likely more, but the settlements were sealed. And Molly? I asked. Claire opened another folder and slid it toward me. Bank statements. Property research. 1-page notes with bullet point lists of my accounts, including access codes I hadn't realized she still knew. She'd even met with a notary under the pretense of starting a transfer document for our joint brokerage, something I'd never approved. She's getting ready to make a move, Claire said. It'll be soon. I felt the blood drain from my face. Should I confront her? I asked. Claire shook her head immediately. Not yet. If you confront her now, she'll lawyer up hard. You want her thinking she still has control. You want her comfortable. Reckless. That's when people make mistakes. So I played along. I kept smiling when she smiled. Kept listening when she floated future vacation plans, just the 2 of us, to reconnect. I even let her show me a new couples app she downloaded to work on emotional in *Macy. She was building a story, trying to create the narrative that we were doing better so that when the divorce papers landed, she'd have a trail of evidence showing she tried everything. I watched her script the whole thing in real time like an actress building her own stage. One night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she showered. Normally, she was meticulous about closing it. But this time she forgot, or maybe she was too confident to care. I clicked open her browser history. A few tabs stood out. How long do I have to live in the house to claim residency in a divorce? Alimony calculator, California. Asset division, separate versus community property. How to appear emotionally stable in custody court. We didn't even have kids. But that's when it hit me, she wasn't just planning for what would happen if we divorced. She was planning how to win. In her nightstand drawer, I found more notes. Printed PDFs titled Divorcing the High Earner, Protecting Emotional Reputation During Litigation and Financial Abuse and Gaslighting in Long-Term Marriages. That last one hit me hard. She was preparing to frame me as the abuser. I had no criminal record, no history of violence, not even a raised voice around her. But that didn't matter. All she needed was the implication. A seed of doubt. The story of a woman who tried everything and a husband who shut down emotionally. The week after that, I had Marcus place surveillance on both Molly and Travis. The footage that came back was so clean it almost looked staged. Dinner in Santa Clara. A weekend spa retreat booked under her assistant's name. A mid-afternoon visit to a high-end family law firm not far from where Jeff Kessler's office was located. They were building the exit ramp. The same week, Molly asked me if I'd considered taking some time off to rest. She even suggested a guy's trip. Somewhere I could unplug. Somewhere with no signal. "You've been so tense lately," she said, rubbing my shoulders as she stood behind me in the kitchen. "You should take a break. Recharge." That was the moment I knew she wanted me gone when the papers dropped. Out of reach. Off the grid. Disoriented. Maybe, I replied. Could be good timing. I smiled at her. She smiled back. The next morning, I quietly began moving critical documents, birth certificate, estate paperwork, copies of my uncle's ranch deed, to a locked safe deposit box at a separate bank under my name only. I redirected 2 of my investment accounts into temporary holds. Froze any automatic transfers from our joint accounts. Canceled my digital password manager and reset every code I'd used in the past 3 years. Then I updated my will. And finally, I contacted a legal team of my own. Not just one attorney, but a full firm. Top tier, conflict-free, aggressive. I walked them through everything. The audio, the surveillance, the financial patterns, Claire's findings. The lead partner just sat there, arms folded, nodding slowly. "She's good," he said, "but not careful enough." We drafted a full plan, pre-litigation asset protection, legal response strategy, and a media prep file in case any of this went public. That weekend, Molly left town again. A company planning retreat she swore was mandatory. She kissed me at the door. Told me she'd be back Sunday. She left her planner open on the counter. Written in the margin for Monday morning. "Call Jeff, final phase starts this week." She'd already decided. She thought I was asleep at the wheel. That I was going to sleepwalk into the next chapter while she orchestrated my exit. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already stepped off the script. The play was still going, but I was no longer in the role she cast me in. Now I was watching from the wings. And I wasn't clapping. There's this moment right before a court session begins when everything goes still. It's not silence, exactly. It's restraint. The shuffle of papers, the murmurs between attorneys, the deliberate click of heels on tile. It's like everyone knows that what's about to unfold is bigger than they're ready for. And on that morning, sitting across from Molly at the hearing, I felt it in my chest like pressure before a storm. She looked calm. That same overconfident stillness she'd carried for weeks now. A fresh beige pantsuit, delicate pearl earrings, perfectly controlled hair. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look nervous. She looked like someone who thought the outcome was already decided. I kept my expression unreadable. Her attorney, Jeff Kessler, sat beside her, flipping through a thick stack of documents with colored tabs poking out like markers in a playbook. He didn't make eye contact with me once. Not even when I leaned forward slightly and folded my hands over the table. That was fine. He'd be seeing me soon enough, just not the version he expected. When the judge called the session into order, the tone changed. Formalities first. Then we moved into statements. Jeff stood up, buttoned his jacket, and began spinning his web. He painted Molly as a devoted wife who tried everything. Emotionally neglected for years, he said. Financially dependent on a husband who grew increasingly distant, controlling, and cold. He spoke about her professional stagnation due to the pressures of domestic labor. About her genuine efforts to mend the relationship and how, tragically, those efforts were not reciprocated. He paused, then held up a folder. In this file are journal entries, calendar logs, and communications reflecting my client's sincere attempts to preserve the marriage, all while enduring emotional hardship. He looked back at Molly, who offered a well-timed sniffle and lowered her gaze. "And for those reasons, Your Honor," Jeff continued, "we are requesting spousal support, equitable division of assets, and partial claim to the recent inheritance which my client contributed to preserving during the course of their marriage." He sat down slowly, like a man convinced he'd just sunk the game-winning **T. I didn't react. Not visibly. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was ready. My attorney stood and opened our own folder. Thicker. Heavier. Labeled with a red tag that simply read, Rebuttal Exhibits A, F. He began with the calmness of someone who knows he's holding a loaded deck. Your Honor, he said, the story you've just heard is compelling, but like many polished narratives, it's fiction stitched from selective memory and omission. He slid the first packet forward. A printed transcript. Jeff glanced at it, squinting slightly. That is a time-stamped recording from a vehicle owned by the petitioner in which she and a man, identified as Mr. Travis Maddox, are heard discussing the timing of a divorce to maximize financial leverage. The judge raised an eyebrow. Jeff shifted in his seat. Further audio confirms an ongoing relationship between the petitioner and Mr. Maddox dating back at least 7 months, well before separation was formally discussed. In these recordings, the two parties openly mock the respondent's trust as well as the respondent's recent inheritance, referring to it, quote, as our exit fuel. Gasps rippled quietly across the benches. Molly's face tightened. Additionally, my attorney continued, we have GPS evidence, receipts, and room registration logs showing multiple overnight stays in hotels not related to any professional obligation. Most notably, on the weekend the petitioner claimed to be attending a work retreat. She was documented in Santa Cruz at a waterfront resort registered under Mr. Maddox's name. He held up a printout room confirmation with both their names on the in-room dining ticket. The judge held out her hand. The bailiff delivered it. Then came the spreadsheets. The notes. Claire's photos of Molly meeting with Jeff Kessler outside of official client hours at a wine bar 2 months before she ever filed paperwork. And then, the final blow, sworn testimony from another woman previously represented by Jeff Kessler who had endured the exact same sequence of events, romantic manipulation by Travis Maddox, legal positioning by Kessler, and a divorce strategy that mirrored mine point for point. Her voice played through the courtroom in a pre-recorded deposition. I didn't see it until it was too late. Travis convinced me I was in love and Jeff made it sound like I was just protecting myself. I lost everything, my reputation, my relationship with my children. If I'd known the two of them had done this before, I never would have trusted either of them. Molly's face finally changed. The polish cracked. Her mouth opened slightly. She turned to Jeff with a flash of panic. He leaned in, whispered something, and started furiously flipping through his papers. But there was nothing in those pages that could undo what we'd presented. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was documented deception. Intentional. Patterned. Exploitive. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was low but clear. Given the overwhelming evidence presented, including recorded conversations, documented misrepresentations, and the petitioner's clear coordination with a known third party, the court finds the petitioner's claims of emotional hardship to lack credibility. Furthermore, due to the nature of the deception and the potential pattern of financial targeting, the court denies any claim to the respondent's inheritance, declares it separate property, and denies spousal support in full. She paused, eyes narrowing slightly at Molly. Additionally, due to the professional conduct of Mr. Kessler, I am referring this case to the State Bar for review of potential ethical violations, particularly regarding attorney-client manipulation and conflict of interest. That's when Molly finally broke. Tears streamed down her face, not slow, poetic ones, but a sudden rush like a dam giving way. Her shoulders shook. She reached for Jeff's arm, but he pulled away slightly, hands folded tightly in his lap. She looked at me then, across the aisle. Not pleading. Not apologizing. Just searching for something. Maybe understanding. Maybe rescue. But I didn't give her either. Because in that moment I didn't see the woman I married. I saw the woman who calculated her way through our marriage like it was a financial plan. Who smiled through a lie for months even as I laid beside her every night. Who thought she could gaslight me out of my own life. When the judge adjourned, Molly stayed seated for a long time. I stood slowly, shook hands with my attorney, and gathered my papers. As I turned to leave the courtroom, I glanced back one last time. She wasn't crying anymore. Just staring. Hollow. Like the floor had given out beneath her and she hadn't stopped falling. Jeff was already packing up, face tight, lips pressed together like a man watching his reputation bleed out in front of him. I didn't feel victorious. But I felt done. And for the first time in months, that was enough.